welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us today for the Future Summit, where we are going to be kind of wrapping up phase one and moving into phase two. And really, we've got you all in listen mode, and we're recording this. We're going to have it available to watch later, or if you want to share with someone, it will be available that way too. And I want to pass it off to Dr. Holland to, I guess, introduce our team here and get us going. So thank you.
Hello, I'm Dr. Brenda Holland, President of Chiro Congress, and on behalf of the Future of Chiropractic Strategic Planning Committee, I want to welcome you to the Future Summit event. Today is an exciting day as it marks the end of the first of 3 separate and distinct phases to the Chiropractic Strategic Visionary Planning Project. To recap, our objective in phase 1 was to gather data which led to the discovery and confirmation of widely supported priorities for the future of the profession. This process occurred through surveys, discussion boards, focus groups, workshops, interviews, and a think tank, which generated data resulting in the discovery and confirmation of widely supported priorities for the future of the profession. Each one of these steps in phase 1 was specifically designed to build upon the preceding steps, which in turn objectively defined the commonalities, priorities, and motivation for change. Since the beginning, we have had an outstanding turnout with close to 4,000 people participating, and each and every one of these touch points allowed for your voice to be heard and acknowledged. I would also like to point out 3 key insights to the group today. That 1, this has been a transparent and inclusive process and has been validated with dedicated focus groups, interviews, think tanks, and workshops, allowing for a robust data set. 2, there is a very strong data-driven support for drafting these high-level priorities. And finally, the results of phase 1 have given chiropractic a very clear direction and mandate to now develop a bold strategic plan. We now invite you to walk through the results of phase 1 and learn more about phase 2 from our 2 facilitators, David and Heather from Future IQ. We'll start by reviewing the results of phase 1, and Karen will walk you through the roadmap of phase 2. So David, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much, Brenda. And fantastic to be here actually at this Future Summit. And you know, these milestones are always great in a project where you can kind of take stock of what's been accomplished and then set the project up for the next stage. So as you said, right, today really is drawing a close to the sort of the discussion about the exploration, or where do we want to go, the sort of visioning part and the sort of high level sort of mission and core values, those sort of conversations. And obviously the next part really moves into the strategic planning. But we wanted to take just a bit of time tonight just to walk through some of the highlights in the data and really, I think, communicate with you what this has revealed in terms of the industry and the appetite for change. Because I think that is the most remarkable thing. So as part of the consulting team, you know, it's been remarkable for me to see the degree of common view and the appetite for change. And I want to kind of make some comments in comparison to other industries as we go through. So I'm going to kick off, and then Carol and Karen will take over. So Carol, can we go to the next slide, please? So as this schematic shows, we're almost at the end of phase 1. There's been a lot of touch points for industry through this process. And as Brenda said, there's been about 4,000 people involved, and they're all high quality touch points. So even the survey was a very extensive survey that took, you know, some considerable thought to be able to answer qualitative and quantitative questions. So it is really quite a remarkable data set that has been building really through the period from October through until now. So next one, Carol. This data, of course, is one of the keywords that Brenda mentioned was transparent and open. So the data that's been gathered through phase 1 is all available on the project portal. And what we have here as an example is some of the tabs on the portal. So there's a drop-down tab, which is data visualization. So there's been 2 major surveys. And you can see that, you know, as you go through the different drop-down tabs, there's different charts there, and I'm going to show you some of those tonight. But you can go in and look for yourself and verify the results and the interpretations that come from the data. Carol? So this is some data, and I just want to pull out a few highlights here. So this is some data from the key perception or key driver future perception survey. just about 3,500 people took this survey. One of the questions we asked in this, or actually a series of questions, were about key drivers that are shaping or changing the industry. And you can see, I'm not going to go into the data in detail, but you can see that there's some really clear differences or different views about a number of different drivers. And part of what we did as we went through the process was we ended up focusing on two core groups of drivers, these two clusters of drivers. And one was really about the whole issue of utilisation acceptance of the industry, and the other one was about the professional pipeline. Carol? In the think tank, so that was material or results from the first survey. In the think tank, we developed up this whole narrative about what would be a series of different sort of plausible futures for the chiropractic industry. And scenario planning is actually a really cool way to think about future vision in a setting like this, where you have an industry coming together and really speculating about, well, where does it go? What are the pros and cons? What are the implications of different future iterations? So essentially the think tank sort of mapped out this what you might call a future canvas, and started to really think about different possible versions of the future and what the implications would be, and then start to think about preference and desire. And I'm not going to go into the detail of this, but the future canvas was really built around these two sort of macro axes, which are about industry acceptance and utilization. This is a topic that is right from the very first discussions with the steering committee, this whole issue about where does chiropractic fit into the whole healthcare sector. That's been something on people's minds. So we really played that out as a sort of a future splitting theme in the think tank. And the other one was around the professional pipeline. And the whole idea about how do you build sort of prosperity, and how do you make the profession attractive to people, and build the pipeline in an appropriate way. So next one, Carol. One of the things we did, and I'll just show you sort of these four big scenarios, right? But this schematic here looks at what we called the expected future. So, and unfortunately the colors dropped out of that for some reason. So, but these were responses to the idea of where do we think the industry is going, if we don't change anything, right? And the takeaway from this is that there was a whole range of views, right? People generally thought the industry would be, there was differing views, but what the key part was the next slide. So if we go to that one, and if in the top right there, you can see that there's a series of circles that were responses to what we were asking about the preferred future. So we asked people about if this whole canvas here was all possible futures, where do you think the industry optimally should end up? And one thing you will notice is that those responses are concentrated very much in the upper right quadrant. And so that was quite a different result to what people said was the expected future. So in other words, where does the industry going to end up if we don't do anything different, to where do we want to be if we have choice, right? Two very different answers. One of the things that's really interesting in this is the very high concentration in that very upper right corner, because that actually is the corner of maximum change. And that the fact that the vast majority of people were right in the upper corner says to me that the industry has real appetite for big change. And we've got some other data to show you that on that as well. So Carol? And this is the expected and the preferred sort of over mapped on each other, but let's go to the next one. Next one, please. All right, so we also probed a series of important themes that in the survey. So these were sort of topics that kept raising to the top all the way through the process. So obviously the role within the industry was one, the professional utilization levels, the industry research focus and how as a profession you tackle that, the professional recruitment, cohesion, unification, political and regulatory influence. They were all sort of important themes. And we probed these in the second round of workshops. And I showed you in the preferred future, this concentration responses in the very sort of the maximum change corner. And these were subsets of those axes. So we wanted to test, did people have the same feeling at individual sort of issue level or theme level. So I'll show you one example of that. And this was a sort of a sensitivity scale or a sliding scale in terms of the future place and role within the healthcare industry and system. And, you know, we're asking people about what do you think would be the ideal future relationship of the profession with the overall healthcare sector, and knowing that with choices come consequences. So one on the left-hand side was, you know, a choice of the profession exists somewhat outside the mainstream healthcare sector. And 10, the right-hand side, was the chiropractic penetrates and integrates deeply into the healthcare system. And you can see a really strong skew on that data, right, on that continuum. But what was interesting was that all 6 of those continuums, all those important themes, showed the same sort of heavy skew to one end. So while not everybody agrees with exactly the same thing, what is clear is that the very large majority of the industry and the profession share some really similar views, right? And given that this data comes from a really broad cross-section, that's a really important takeaway from I think phase 1, because one of the things we understood going into phase 1 was that there was a concern about the industry doesn't really have the ability to find agreement on key issues, right? That there's been sort of divisions and factions and sort of disputes or so on. But the data suggests that on really fundamental issues, there's very high levels of agreement right across the industry, right across the country, right? And that's from, you know, nearly 4,000 responses on a whole range of different questions tested in different ways. What we keep seeing is agreement around key issues over and over. And I think that's a really, really important piece to take away from phase 1, that underlying a lot of the dialogue in the industry, there's very high levels of agreement. Carol, you want to jump to the next one? Jump over that one. Colours have dropped out. Just 2 more slides and then I want to hand off to Carol. So this was a question I thought was a very interesting response set. So this was in the first survey. There was 2,500 responses to this question. And we were asking people, how important do you think it is to have a shared vision for the future of the chiropractic profession? Left-hand side, scale 1, not at all important, 10, critically important. And you can see that skews, you know, very strongly towards the important and critically important side. And again, given the size of this data set and the sort of broad representation, I think that sense of a desire for a shared vision is really potent when you think about an industry that's trying to chart its course going forward, that there's this really deep desire and appetite for coming together around common direction. Next one, Carol. But this one is probably actually, to me, is one of the most important charts, because this is really talking about urgency for change. And so it's one thing to have a sense of it's important to have a shared vision. And it's one thing to understand that you know, shared vision is in a very particular concentrated area of a scenario or a future canvas. But how fast do we want to move? And that's important because trajectory is the visioning part and velocity is the speed of change. And the strategic plan needs to take both those factors into account. And this was a question about how quickly do we think the leaders in the chiropractic profession need to adopt and pursue the preferred vision. 1, it's not urgent right now. 10, it's critically urgent right now. And again, you can see this really strong skew towards one end of that scale. And I don't think I've seen a data set from an industry that talks about an urgency for change in this intensity, right? So from the phase 1 piece, the big building blocks so far is there's a very high level of agreement about where the preferred future is. So in other words, what's our vision? There's a very high level of recognition about you know, the importance of that vision and being able to sort of articulate that and have that as part of the framework of the industry. And there's also a very high level of urgency to act on that. And so I think those 3 factors coming together are really the perfect trilogy for setting up for a potent and ambitious strategic plan, because people know where they want to go. They want to know they know they want to go there together, and people want to do it really fast. And that's basically what the data is saying out of this section of phase 1. So I want to hand this across now to the charity team. So I think Karen's going to pick this up first of all, because there was a couple of other really key dimensions that were built out in phase one that we want to share with you tonight as well.
Thanks, David. That was great. And I think, David, both you and Brenda have done a great job already of articulating really the process and the intent behind the process that we've gone through in the last 5 months. And with that intent to be transparent and really widely inclusive, and then narrow down to dig deep into really gaining a greater understanding of why elements that are coming up to the top are critically important. And that's what I get to share right now, a little bit of that. So what you're looking at on your screen right now are the 6 elements that throughout the process continue to be discussed, talked about, and rise to the level of greatest importance when it comes to really why the chiropractic profession exists, and really create a foundation for an outward facing mission for the chiropractic profession. And what you see here are the common elements of drug-free, non-invasive, whole body wellness, hands-on, compassionate, and patient-centered, of course. And so what's important, and something that has come through every focus group session, every workshop, and even the one-on-one interviews with the key influencers that we've conducted, is that the outward facing element is really critical right now. Really focusing on the patient and the perception of the profession by people who are outside of the profession. So, Carol? So this next slide here is related to core values that are seen as most critical as chiropractors as you move through your workday. And what has risen to the top again over and over throughout the process is compassionate, patient-centered care, trustworthy, ethical behavior, and honest, transparent communication. And I kind of dig the honest, transparent communication right now because of this process that we've undergone. Over the last several months, again, we have tried really hard to be widely inclusive and completely transparent with every aspect and every stage, every step we've gone through. And that's just another symbol of why honest, transparent communication has risen to the top as a core value for the overall profession. Carol? And then finally, what you're looking at here are the strategic priorities that have come through as the 4 priorities that have the most broadly accepted viewpoint as being necessary to gain traction with now. And those are professional identity. Again, this is an outward facing identity. Legislation, utilization, which touches a whole host of elements, and then research, both with regard to existing research and future needs of research. So this is what the last 5 months of data gathering, intensive conversations, and digging deeply and really seeking to understand and truly pull out broadly accepted common ground amongst the profession. And there they are. Carol?
Thanks, Karen. And these might not be surprising to many of you, especially if you've participated in focus groups or in the think tank. Certainly, there were a lot of questions around these from us in the survey as well. But these are just a jumping off point. And so I'm going to take just a moment and walk you through phase 2. As we mentioned, there are 3 phases to this project that are critically important. The first phase is going to be starting actually this afternoon, immediately after this workshop. We're going to be having a kickoff for the next phase of work And then we're going to be taking each one of those strategic priorities, and we have task forces, work groups that are going to be meeting over the course of the next 8 weeks. They're going to be 4 sessions. They will be rolling up their sleeves, really intensely working on, now that we know that this is a priority area, what is the data telling us? Where do we need to go to start making some of that immediate impact that David had mentioned? So those groups are going to be really, they'll meet every other week, and you actually now have the opportunity still to sign up for one of these work groups in one of these key priority areas. And I'm going to walk you through just, again, what we're going to be accomplishing in phase 2. So we'll be going in initially and setting what are those goals that we want to accomplish underneath each of these priority areas. And some of the data has already really played out what some of those goals may be, but we're going to be talking about that in these work groups. And goals are great, but if you don't have benchmarks, timelines, accountability, and an action plan, nothing will happen. So we will be actually building out over the course of time together actionable items, metrics that will be tracked, and very, very clear pathways on how we're going to start both immediately and long-term accomplishing some of the goals, so that this process, the last few months, it's not just a really nice report that sits someplace. It's really going to be an actionable item. We're going to be looking too at 2 critical areas. One of those is resources that are going to be needed in order to pull the plan off. And then finally, we'll be developing a strategy to go out and fundraise so that the funding is available to actually implement the action items. The last piece of this is then implementation. We'll be handing off our product at the end of phase 2 to another company called On Strategy, which will be working with the profession through the implementation of this whole project. And I am really looking forward to working with them over the next phase, as well as many of you who I know have already signed up. But this is your opportunity. If you have the time and are willing to really roll up your sleeves, we're going to be getting very hands-on and creating this really actionable plan that will take the profession through the next 5 years. And with that, I am going to hand this off to, I believe, Dr. Dan and Dr. J to wrap up, and then we're going to take questions.
Thank you, Carol. Sorry, it took me a while to unmute. Ninja brother, Dr. Dan Spencer, what's happening, bro?
Hey, it's happening, isn't it? We got things rolling.
It is happening. And before we get to your perspective on all this, I really just want to give a huge shout out to Future IQ and to Charity for doing just an incredible job of collaboration. I mean, technically, we have these facilitators, 2 different companies, essentially competitors, deciding to come together and collaborate to create immense positive impact. And they've been creating regular communication. Obviously, Liz has been a rock star for us, kind of, shepherding all of us cats. But they've been rock stars in regular communication and also leveraging technology and data science, as everyone can see, to create inclusivity, clarity, and transparency throughout this entire process. And I got to give you guys a shout out, because what you've done has been truly remarkable. And I'm so excited. We're so excited about next steps. I also want to thank all the participants who are on this call and others who weren't able to make this call, but have played an important role in helping to construct our future. So Dan, this process started back in San Diego. You were president of Chiro Congress, a member of the Chiropractic Summit. We had 2 meetings that weekend, the summit meeting and at Chiro Congress, an all hands on deck meeting with all the states. And it was clear, like, okay, the profession desperately needs a strategic plan. So why is this so important?
Oh, definitely. Well, first of all, I'd like to thank you, Dr. Greenstein, and of course, all the members of the task force, now committee, and Liz. It's been a monumental amount of work, but so needed for the entire profession. As you mentioned, we have Future IQ, we've got Charity, great, support and wisdom. We're using their expertise. But we've been around for 125 years as a profession, right? We have never had a profession-wide strategic plan, not just for survival, but to thrive as a profession, right? Ultimately, this comes back to society and that people need chiropractic care now more than ever. In fact, you could say that the only thing that we've agreed upon in 125 years is that we have a lot of disagreements. So through this process, as you said, Jay, it's been inclusive, data-driven, transparent, unbiased. We want to get the pulse of the entire profession and find the areas that we do have agreement upon and build off of those agreements. And that's what this is today. That's the end of phase one, of course. We've got more to come. But we want to build that strategic plan based off of where we agree and how we can grow as a profession. And that's the importance.
Yeah, it's such an important point, Dan, because at the end of the day, no one organization owns this. This is really has been built and constructed for the entire profession. And I just think that's just remarkable. Speaking of remarkable, we've had some good victories along the way. So why don't you just share some of the victories that we've had during this journey so far?
Exactly. We've had, close to 4,000 people participate, which is amazing. That's a great level of participation. Not only the surveys, the focus groups, obviously, as I mentioned, the task force, we've got a broad base of the entire industry that's really taken part. And that's really what we wanted from the very beginning, is we wanted to hear everyone's voices. And again, this is really just the end of phase one. So there's still a little bit of work to do. Obviously, we've got to come up with this plan and then implement it. We're right on track. Obviously, still more to do, like I said, but we're getting there. And it's important that people remain engaged. We still have more data. We've got more planning to do, all of those things. So we don't want to drop the ball now. We're marching down the field. We've just got to keep this going. But and it's important that anyone involved spread the word. There's still time for other people to be involved as well. But yeah, we've had a lot of victories. I mean, this has been a culmination of a lot of hard work over the past at least year and a half now, just to get to this point. And we still have more victories ahead.
Yes, we do. And I agree. We definitely need people to continue to stay engaged, be involved, provide feedback, be active on the discussion boards. There's a bunch of discussion boards. You can check it out on the Chiro Congress website. Get involved in these next set of interventions that Charity is planning, because again, the more feedback we have, the stronger we're going to end up. So great point. Please stay involved. There's been some challenges along the way, my friend. We've not always, this has been, this task force and this process has been a little microcosm of the profession to a degree, because we've not always agreed. That's normal. That's life, right? So what have been some of the challenges, and what do you think has been so instrumental in our ability to overcome those challenges, which I think we've done a really great job at?
Oh, great point. Well, there was this, I don't know if you heard about this virus going around, coronavirus. Yeah, it was a challenge for everybody. I mean, let's face it. It did require that we switch gears a little bit. Last year, we implemented, the calls through Chiro Congress for the state associations. We had urgent fires to put out. So things may have been delayed a little bit longer than we wanted, but we have to roll with the punches sometimes. As you mentioned, Dr. Greenstein, just finding consensus on how to put the project together and who was going to collaborate with us, how this was all going to look, that did take some time and effort. But in the end, I think the product that we are getting is totally worth it. So, the setup may have taken a little longer than we wanted, but again, at the end of the day, it's going to be just fantastic once we're all done with this process and once we have a plan that we can implement. Obviously, getting the word out to the profession, that was a bit of a challenge. There's a lot of, I like to say there's a lot of tents in chiropractic. So we want to try to reach into all of those different tents so we can get all of those viewpoints. But again, I think if you look at the participation and how well-rounded and distributed it is, we really knocked that one out of the park too.
Yeah, 100%. It has been an interesting process, especially as you mentioned, when we went through the selection process, we interviewed I don't even know how many different organizations looked at so many RFPs, requests for proposals. Liz, poor Liz, God, we got to like take her out to dinner and like buy her a bunch of wine, because she has like been worth her weight in gold, like exponentially. But the number of organizations that we interviewed, and we went through the process several times just to be as thorough as we could possibly be. And I think we ended up with this really unique approach of bringing on 3 different organizations with incredible skill sets to ultimately get the best result for the profession. And I'm just so excited for this next phase. So as it relates to this next phase, Dr. Dan, I mean, we heard from Carol, but like anything else that you want to share with the audience today, share with the profession for those that'll be watching this later about the next phase.
Well, again, I would just reiterate, it's an inclusive process. We want everybody involved. Everyone is welcome. This is the plan for our profession, not any one group. So if you don't want to participate, then don't complain that your voice isn't heard, because this is the opportunity now to be involved. So again, share with your colleagues. Funding is another an area that we could definitely use some help with. I mean, there are expenses with this project, and again, it goes towards a very good cause. And I think hopefully Liz could put up the link there if anyone's so moved to help contribute. But we're not, asking that you definitely contribute financially to just contribute in terms of participation. We want participation first and foremost.
Yes, 100%. Absolutely. The more voices, the better. All right, my friend, any final thoughts for the audience today, or the audience that'll be listening at a later date?
I am so looking forward to getting this plan ready to go and rolling it out for the profession. The next few months are going to be a very exciting time to be in the chiropractic industry.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Well, thank you, Ninja Brother. Appreciate all the blood, sweat, and tears you put into this profession. Appreciate the task force, all the amazing people on the task force, and certainly Future IQ and Charity, and definitely Miss Liz. Thank you, Liz. All right, I'm going to turn it over.
I think we're moving into Q&A now. So we have a few questions teed up. One of them is from Robin Abrams. It's regarding personal injury segment and how that will either was addressed or will be addressed in the future. So I don't know, Carol wants to jump.
Okay. Yeah, I can take that one. That issue actually came up in a part of the process. We didn't specifically ask that question. We asked about third-party payers, but as we move into utilization, and part of utilization is patient demand for the service, but also the ability to pay for the service. We're going to be looking at a lot of different types of utilization: Medicare, Medicaid, third-party payers, self-pay companies that are self-insured, and the workers' comp industry has come up as an issue, as well as self-pay. So there are a lot of different ways that people pay for chiropractic services and health services in general, and so we will be looking at that in that committee.
Excellent, thank you. I will put a link up here shortly. I'm going to put a couple links up in just a moment, just to go over here for a second. I'm going to put up the final report from Future IQ and Charity from phase 1. So there'll be a link to that up in the chat. And then I'll put a link to ways that you can contribute to this project as well in a few minutes. So next question is from Dana Lawrence. And I'm sorry. Yes, it is. While you've had significant input into the development of this effort, it still represents about 5% of the profession. What will you do to obtain more buy-in before you attempt to implement such a plan? So David, I don't know if you want to address the amount of participation and.
Yeah. So just a quick comment. I think that the issue about the percentage of people who responded relative to the industry is really important, right? But 5% is, if that's the number, that's it. But I would say this is we look really hard at making sure or checking that the data was what you might call representative, and you can go into the data visualization on the portal, and Liz will send you the link for that. And we've sort of broken it out into a whole different sort of range of factors. So the size of the practice people are in, what zip code they're from, how long they've been in the industry, what association they're affiliated with, and it really is quite a remarkable cross section of the industry. And I think that's really credit to Liz and others for for doing the work and building partnership with other sort of organizations in the profession to get it out. And I think we have a high level of comfort that the data is representative, right? And it was tested as well through the focus groups and interviews. So I think it gives a really good pulse, a really accurate pulse of what's on the minds of people in the industry. Is it 100% of people? No, but is it large enough and a diverse enough sample that you could have confidence to go forward thinking that you've captured the primary points? Absolutely. I think, however, to pick up what Brenda said and what Dan said and Jay said, I think it's beholden upon everybody to encourage people, particularly in the next phases, as you get into the strategy development, and the implementation, to continue to keep that door open and find ways to encourage people to come in and be part of the process. So I think you can have confidence in the representativeness of it, but I think the task of being inclusive and inviting people in never ends, right?
Thank you. Appreciate that, David. So next comment from Dr. Fab. Great job, very insightful. Let's make sure that we stay on course regardless of the reservations by a few. Count me in. Thanks, Dr. Fab. Appreciate your support on that. Dr. Reno, when you mentioned monetization of this project, what's the best way for participants to spread the word? What is the best verbiage to use? Carol, you want to talk about that?
Yeah, I'm fundraising is the passion of mine. So what we're going to be doing, as I mentioned earlier, you cannot have a plan if you don't have the resources to implement it. So what we will be doing during phase 2 is kind of a complementary process, is actually building out a strategy to take the different components and the goals that we'll be developing and going out and reaching out to individuals, companies outside of the profession, as well as inside, but having really measurable objectives so that can be monetized. So part of the fundraising strategy will be built out and you'll have those tools in just a couple of months. Right now, if someone wants to fund a part of this process or support the process, really being able to say that this is an evidence-based process, that there's hard data that shows this is the direction that, again, 80-20, the majority of chiropractors want the profession to go in, and that the next phase is not only going to be evidence-based, is going to be very metrically driven, but the on-strategy platform that will be used for the implementation phase will also be very transparent. So you'll actually be able to watch as the plan gets implemented and be able to see this. So one of the things that the planning committee has very deliberately built is a process where donors can actually see that the process is working and that the profession is moving forward. So that's always when you're going out and talking to people about funding. This is really an exciting structure and very unique in the way that it's been built. So certainly if you have someone that's interested in raising funds, and I think talk to Liz, or they can, I'm more than happy to give you some suggestions.
Thank you, Carol. That's awesome. Beth Clay says the very important comments from the various forums are no longer available on the website. Can those be made available? They were as important or maybe more so than the in totals. Beth, that's a great question. We did take the discussion boards down, but we did memorialize the content of that, and I do have it available. And so if anybody wants that, they can reach out to me, and it's broken out by each question with the comments. And so that is still available, just put it that way. So just let me know if you want to see that in a Excel spreadsheet, basically. Let's see, Dr. Lawrence. Yes, representation is important, but that is not the point. As someone who ran best practices process for CCGPP more than a decade ago, I can tell you that the pushback we received was significant, and that was with the fact that we allowed for 3 months of comment from public. You will run into resistance if people are not allowed further input, even if they could have participated now. Karen or Carol, you want to talk about the future input?
In terms of future input, we're going to have a couple of different opportunities for people to give input. We'll certainly be presenting in April and have some opportunities there. You can participate in the work groups. We'll be doing a lot of information, pushing information out to you about the work groups and how those are progressing. While the discussion boards were part of phase 1, and we won't be doing the discussion boards as part of phase 2, there will be an opportunity to have some discussion around that. We'll also be doing another one of these toward the end of May, when we finalize all the goals and objectives. This is not something that is going to be delivered, set in stone, and then calcified. Plans should be living, breathing, and ever-changing structures. And that's one of the dangers when you think, well, it's now been put in writing and therefore it's the gospel truth, right? What will happen is, as you start to work with the implementation phase, you may find that in 6 months, something happens like, I don't know, pandemic, and then you have to shift. We've all had to shift this last year, and goals, objectives, strategies may shift. That's what happens when you're doing large systemic change. So please know that regardless of where we end up in May, this is a living, breathing process that then continues far into the future. So while we're going to be setting and saying this is where we want to be in 5 years, that may dramatically change within a short period of time based on the wins and changes that happen along the way.
Those are all good points. Charmaine Herman, how does the project plan to address the issue of diversity and inclusion in the profession? Karen, you're nodding your head. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, I would love to. Actually, Charmaine, every single opportunity we had to actually connect like this with participants through the process, the topic of diversity and inclusion has been discussed in every cohort group that included college presidents, regulators and researchers, students, chiropractors practicing greater than 5 years, and chiropractors practicing less than 5 years. Every single group has brought the need for, it's past time for greater diversity and inclusion through leadership throughout the profession, as you know, and just really do a better job outwardly facing, you know, with that messaging that's outward facing, that really connects better to the demographics of the communities that the chiropractic profession wants to be serving as well. So diversity and inclusion starts with, we want to have very diverse work groups. So we are intentionally seeking, and I know, you know, we've got some amazing volunteers already to be in these work groups, but you know, who needs to be at the table? We need to have diversity at the table as we work through these action plans as well. So you might be a great candidate to be involved, since this is an important topic for you. But you know, what it ultimately looks like from a hard goals and measurable outcomes, we don't know yet, but rest assured, it has come up in every single conversation that we've had. So it is, there's a big magnifying glass on diversity and inclusion right now.
All right, thanks, Karen. Eric, Dr. Plasker, thanks. Great job, team. I'm enjoying being involved, looking forward to the next phase. Thank you. We're enjoying having you involved, and everybody else as well. So Dr. Chris Anderson, Carol mentioned there is still time to sign up for phase 2 groups. Where can that be done? That can be done at the Chiro Congress website. I will put a link in here for you to go to a registration form and get that to you here just shortly. And then Beth Clay says, yes, please, on the spreadsheet. So any other questions or comments while I grab that link?
I think Chris Anderson also did have a question.
Oh, did he? Okay, I'm sorry. Is it another one that I've overlooked? I'm sorry.
Yeah, this is Carol. There's still some, where can that be done? Okay, you were going to put that in the chat, right, Liz? Where to sign up for the phase 2 groups? Okay, cool. Yep. Thanks.
Liz, I just text you a question that came through in the chat box.
And so there, yep, let me put this in super quick. I covered up my chat box with the Q&A. That wasn't Smart. So we had a question about, are we considering to going to all of those that have participated to date in the surveys and workshop and ask them to donate since they have already shown commitment? Yes, we've been kind of doing a soft ask in all of our email updates to say, you know, we can take donations and contribution through our charitable nonprofit. And that is also available on the website. I think I put a link to that in the Chiro Congress Future of Chiropractic Strategic Plan page. So if anybody has questions about that, just let us know. But it is a charitable nonprofit 501c3. So it's a deductible donation according to what the IRS will let you do. Let's see, are there more?
The rest of the chat questions got moved to Q&A.
Okay, great. Anything else we see here? Great job. The ICA appreciates the opportunity to support this important project and to be involved. Looking forward to phase 2. We appreciate your support too. Thank you for being here. Eric Kirk says, very well stated by Carol, market shift, evidence shift, payer shift. Got to be careful with how I say this, and regulation and legislation shifts. The industry is on a constant state of flux, and this is true. If anything we've known to be true this last year is everything's in a constant state of flux, and we all learn to navigate that. Anything else in here that I'm missing? I think that's it.
Yeah, let me just add one last thing about, you know, if you for some reason can't participate in phase 2 because the work groups, we do have to limit the size just so that we can get a lot of work done. Phase 3, there will be lots of committees that will be established, and Karen and I are already kind of strategizing on what this is going to look like, but there's going to be a lot of opportunity to get involved in phase 3. So please stay involved. And if you really, really, really want to be in a work group and it's full, let Liz know. But we're really excited about everybody working with you in phase 2. And I want to encourage everybody to stay involved, reading and letting us know what you think.
Excellent. Well, Dr. Holland, do you want to, with no other questions and nothing else in chat, Dr. Holland, you have any final words?
I just want to, again, kind of echo what Jay said. I know that we appreciate everyone's effort in this project, from the facilitators to Liz to our participants. And we have really tried hard to be as transparent as possible in this process. So thank you very much for everyone's participation. And I look forward, and we as a committee look forward to working with everyone moving forward into phase 2 and phase 3. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Brenda.
Take care. Have a good weekend.
Thanks, everyone.
All right. Bye-bye.